Public parks are one of the many recreational facilities that we take for granted. But up to a century ago, there were no public parks in the potteries. Residents of the 6 towns had to make do with a number of small recreation grounds and the annual visit to the Duke of Sutherland's gardens at Trentham. By the 1870s, the Duke had developed his lands south of Longton for suburban housing and called the areas Normacot, Dresden and Florence, Florence after his eldest daughter. He proposed a park as a focal point within these housing developments. By 1886, the areas had been absorbed into the borough of Longton, to which the Duke donated the 45-acre site of the present park, bounded by Trentham and Cocknage roads and by the Florence Railway. Money for the park was raised by public subscription. It cost around £6,000 and was stocked with some 15,000 trees and shrubs, with many of the larger plants donated by the Duke of Sutherland and other patrons. The Duke's land agent, J.H. Garrett, was in charge of its planning and layout. The park was formally opened on the 25th of July 1888 and was seen as a much-needed breathing space for the people working in the smoky towns. Since then, the public parks have often been referred to as the lungs of the city, where working people could breathe the fresh air and enjoy the greenery and flowers. John MacPhail was appointed as the first park superintendent in July 1888. He was paid 30 shillings a week with rent, rates, taxes, coal and gas provided free. He had an assistant park superintendent and 6 labourers. In June 1892, a man was engaged on a seasonal basis to look after the boats on the lake. It's clear from the charges imposed that many of the facilities provided at the park were intended for relatively well-off visitors. The hire of a boat in 1899, for instance, was £1 an hour for 1 or 2 people, with an extra charge of 6p for each additional person. For many working people, this was the equivalent of half a day's wages. In January 1890, it was agreed to allow skating on the lake when frozen over. Adult skaters were to be charged 6p admission, children under 14 3p. No skating was allowed on Sundays. Fishing was allowed from June 1890 at a rate of 2 shillings and 6p a day. It was resolved to ban bicycles, tricycles and dogs from the park, and visitors had to keep off the grass. It was decided not to install swings for children and to make no special provision for cricket or football. The next park to be planned was Hanley Park, designed by Thomas Mawson and completed in 2 parts. The Calden grounds were opened in July 1894 and the rest of the park area was opened in June 1897. The grounds included a formal terrace garden, a large bowling green, a pavilion and bandstand, together with carriage drives. The ornamental lake, fed from the Calden Canal, covered 5 acres and cost £2,500 to construct. The total cost of the park was over £70,000. The site of Burslem Park had been derelict land, riddled with pit shafts and cinder heaps. The park was also designed by Thomas Mawson and was opened in August 1894 at a cost of £15,500. There followed Etruria Park in 1904, Northwood Park in 1907, Tunstall Park, seen here, in 1908, and finally Fenton Park in 1924. Of the 6 towns, only Stoke remained without a large public park. The parks were obviously much-needed breathing spaces in the smoky environment of Stoke-on-Trent.
Well, I can go back into the late 1920s, 27, 28, 29 and the early 30s. My recollection of the park is beautiful days, sunny days, when this area, Dresden, was a residential area. It was controlled by, people lived in it, headmasters, professional men, manufacturers, a surgeon from the hospitals, and their sons and daughters used to come in here and all the finery, you know, blazers, straw beamers, flannels, and the ladies in all the flowered skirt, the flowered dresses. and they'd walk around here, and then the gigs would come along, horse and carriage with the professional people in, and these used to be carriageways.
The children had a particular worry. All the grass verges were protected by semicircular hoops of steel, and heavy keep off the grass signs were evident everywhere. And they used to stand there in defiance of Mr. MacVale, the superintendent, driving about in his little gig and his sister Rosie. And I have seen him on many occasions, lads who put the foot on the grass verge in defiance as his approach, and I've seen him flick at them with his whip. Not with any serious intent to hurt them, but to scare them up. But of course the children took it that way, that there was intent to hurt them.
I can go back to the days when we had a boating lake, and you could go out on the lake. You paid about twopence or threepence for an hour on the boating lake, and the chap had used to push you off and go round.
And when it was a beautiful day like this, you could go into the cafe and get a cup of tea or an ice cream for the kids, or a sandwich or a drink, and sit in there, and it was nice and cool.
And the bandstand, we have a gem there, it was a wonderful edifice. On the top was a golden baton, drum major's baton, upright. And the bands, we had all the famous bands, Bessies of the Barns, all the Guards bands, Foldens and the lot.
Bess of the Barns.
And there's about 6 rows of seats all the way round, and you had to pay a penny to go into there, and you had to behave yourself. The boys stood all on the perimeter outside, and the girls marched past in the finery, and you used to whistle them, and as a matter of fact I met my wife there.
And then there was a promenade. Yeah. From the bottom there, you could walk from that area there, right the way over to the bottom gate of the bottom lake. And everybody could walk along the top, and they could view the whole of the park from that area. And it was a beautiful place.
The park fetes that used to be Whit Monday, Whit Tuesday, and they were really lovely. And as I say, the piece of ground up there was all ringed round, and the little children used to be able to sit inside. The people could be 10 deep outside, and all the sports, all sleeping, all that. Finish up with a nice firework display at night.
I felt an air of magic about the place, even at that young age. The trees, the birds, the atmosphere, the lakes and the docks and everything. It was something that you cannot really talk about. It's in your mind, it's part of you. It's something you'll never forget as long as you live.
Apart from general recreation, the parks have always been focal points for festivals and special events.
The main thing I remember about Hanley Park, of course, was the bicentenary pageant. I was in that.
Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald sent best wishes for a successful pageant, and it was opened on Monday the 19th of May 1930 by Princess Mary as a triumphant panorama of local history. There were 5,000 performers, an orchestra of 100, a choir of 500, and a covered auditorium which seated 3,000. The history of Stoke was told in 8 episodes. In episode 1, early Britons were urged by their arch-druid to resist the occupation of the Romans in AD 58 and just escape a Roman legion passing by. The second episode showed St. Chad spreading Christianity and the sons of Wulfhere being murdered at Stone in 650 AD. Then John of Gaunt holds a minstrel's court and presents the Witchna Flitch of Bacon in 1374. The fourth episode showed the dissolution of Hulton Abbey in 1539 and its possessions being auctioned. Then we see pioneer peasant potters at work and play in the 17th and early 18th centuries. Episode 6 showed incidents in the life of Josiah Wedgwood. The Wedgwood family here played their own ancestors. It contained the bizarre spectacle of dozens of girls dressed as Portland vases, and many local people remember this episode particularly well. The 7th episode showed Thomas Cooper and the Chartist movement at Hanley in 1842, and it ends with fierce fighting with a group of striking miners. The final episode was an allegorical portrayal of the modern potteries industries, with the dancing hours on a Wedgwood vase coming to life. Among the famous people who came to see the pageant was George Bernard Shaw. He was staying at Buxton and motored over, but having forgotten his invitation card, he waited his turn in the queue to get in. At his speech afterwards, he said, "Having seen such a magnificent company as I have today, I shall have to write a play for you." He didn't, of course. The purpose of the pageant was twofold. Sir Francis Joseph said, "Behind the whole celebrations lie two motives. One is to pay tribute to the great founder of the British modern pottery industry. The other is to show the world that the inherited craftsmanship of the potters of North Staffordshire has not lost its cunning with the passing of the centuries. We are going through hard times. The productive power of the area is desperately in need of more orders. These celebrations are designed to be, and will be, a great help." This film of the pageant was shown at the Regent Cinema, Hanley, the following week. On a smaller scale, a popular annual event presented in Hanley Park in the 1930s was the Carnival of the Queens, where all the carnival and rose queens from areas all over the city and its neighbouring villages paraded with their retinues. The event was organised by the North Staffs Royal Infirmary and raised much needed funds. The prizes were awarded by the surgeon, Mr. Young, who was president of the infirmary. With the coming of the Second World War at the end of the 30s, large areas of the public parks were turned over to the war effort, digging for victory. This film was made for the Stoke-on-Trent Lands Cultivation Committee and shows activity in many of the local allotments and the parks. In Queen's Park, Longton, 6 acres of land were ploughed up to grow vegetables, mostly potatoes. This is Drubbery Lane allotment. It was commenced during the First War and is obviously well established. This man is hoeing kale. And here they're making drills for carrot seed. Now Goms Mill allotment, taken over during the Second War. This is Fenton Park, where the ladies are hoeing cauliflowers. 3 acres of the 17-acre park were ploughed up to grow vegetables, a large proportion for a small park. Now Wealdon Road allotment, with the Mount Tabor Church seen in the background. The ladies are just as keen as the men to do their bit. Here's a man constructing a well, a wise precaution against a long spell of dry weather. Here we come to the Grove Road allotment with Fenton Station in the background. This man is hoeing potatoes in Hanley Park. These beds have been sown with cabbage plants, cauliflower and Brussels sprouts for resetting and for sale to the public. Here on the terrace we see a border normally sporting flowers being used for growing cabbages. Other flower beds were also turned over to vegetables. Close by is Wellesley Street allotment. Most of the men are hoeing, and here's a man spraying cucumber plants as protection against blight. Children are also keen to help. Burslem Park was used for growing spring cabbages, seen here, and also onions, leeks, red cabbage, Brussels sprouts and cauliflowers. Members of the Women's Land Army are following the keeper's instructions for drawing drills for haricot beans for winter storage. Tomato plants are staked and tied in the greenhouses. Here, children of Moorland Road School are busy working on a patch in the park which was loaned to the school. This is a general view of Bank Hall allotment. Again, people are hoeing potatoes. At Tunstall Park, we can see the areas given over to growing potatoes, Brussels sprouts, cauliflowers, broad beans, carrots, parsnips, cabbages, and some onion beds. Now we come to the Stoke allotment near the Michelin Sports Ground. Here we see Councillor A.A. Wayne, chairman of the Lands Cultivation Committee, introducing an expert horticulturalist who's come to the allotment to advise the allotment holders on methods of plant protection. She shows them how to spray potatoes as protection against blight. She then demonstrates how to make a good compost heap. And the same lady is seen talking on the allotment at Chaplin Road in Longton. The film then takes us to the allotment at Tylery Lane, Blurton. We're shown this one-legged gentleman preparing a potato trench and then manuring it. Obviously, if he can dig for victory with his disability, no viewer of the film could possibly think it too strenuous. Having promoted digging for victory, we're now shown some splendid results. Here at Drubbery Lane allotments, Blurton, and then at Stanya's allotments in Dresden, where they'd held a competition. After the war, the parks were restored to their former glory, to be enjoyed by a whole new generation.
We spent most of our time down at the bottom part, you know, being chased by the parkies.
And the playground was in the bottom there, it wasn't
Underneath
where
the
it is
railway
now.
and underneath the top walk.
And there was a big paddling pool, remember. Sometimes it got water in, other times it hadn't. And the old gentlemen call it the promenade, but we called it Lover's Lane. And we used to go and disturb, we were young,
Courting
disturb
couples
the
up there.
couples up there who were trying to have a...
Who'd complain to the park keepers who'd chase us.
So, and the boats, of course, we used to go on the boats.
And the big slide.
On the slide, and we used to go over to the island.
A very tall slide, it was magnificent, you know. And you used to climb up the sides trying to get in front of the queue. And you weren't quite physically abused by the rest of the queue, but it was a brilliant park.
And the boats, we used to go over to the island, which wasn't really allowed. But we used to go over and get off and go in, and they were shouting to us.
Number
to
94,
say,
your
"Please
time's
come
up."
in. And we were sort of exploring the island, pretending.
Always looking
you know,
for crocodiles.
Yes.
You know, everybody looked for crocodiles.
Doing the Peter Pan thing, you know.
Then people remember a
Said
period
it
of
was burnt
problems.
down, and then we had a pavilion here. This tennis court wasn't here then, was it?
No.
Not at that time. This had been built in the last 40 years. There used to be a pavilion here where the footballers could change, because that was fenced off. That was a ring area, and sports were played on there. That was a football ground, and they used to change here, but that was burnt down. And then we had a beautiful aviary full of coloured birds, beautiful birds. And in front of it was a trough with big fish in, beautiful fish. And that was broken into, and that was destroyed, and of course that was taken up. And then the children, when they used to come with their parents, at the bottom of this playground area here, there used to be a large paddling pool, a large one, concrete one. And of course that was vandalised. They were throwing glass in, and that was vandalised, that was taken up, and then it was rebuilt here in this play area. And then this was a drinking font. There was brass cups on here, water was pouring out continually, brass cups on chains. There was one inside the lower gate at the bottom, that was taken up. And there was one by the Ainsley Pavilion, but that's gone by the board. And most of the things have gone by the board in the park.
I think it changed tremendously
And
then.
it went drab, or appeared to go drab. It could have been the fact that, being a lot more worldly wise, it wasn't quite as big as it was, because they're never as big, are they? Or they're never as fantastic, and the colours are never as bright.
But I mean, it is lovely now.
I come in the park 2 or 3 times a day. I was in this morning at 6:15. Really lovely park to be in.
It's a beautiful park, and I like to come in here on a summer's day.
This park was beautiful to begin with. It suffered declining years. I'm afraid I couldn't just give you the years, but you had a bit of an insight. But during the management, whoever's responsible, this last 10 to 15 years, it has definitely been reborn. And it's been restored to its former glory. It's never looked nicer, and it looks as nice as it was the day in the early days. As I say, it has been reborn.
With the city's great reclamation schemes of recent years, many new parks have been created, often from the dereliction of yesterday's industry. And today the people of the Potteries enjoy the rich heritage of a century of public parks.